Hello and welcome to FU Cancer at Mike's Journey. This is episode number 6. I'd like to thank everybody for following along. I know this information isn't riveting. Unfortunately, there's nothing about cancer or my life that is all that riveting. But I just want to, explain that this is the foundation to immunotherapy. So, like I said from the beginning, all this stuff interacts with each other. And this is part of the basics of immunotherapy. If it was as simple as getting a needle and saying, okay, you're done and your hands are wiped, then it would be a pretty short story, but there's so much more involved with that. And I really hope to reach out to the people that are going through some kind of symptoms of their own, or they know somebody that is, and maybe they can take a little bit of health into their own hands, whether you're going through chemotherapy or radiation. I mean, this information you don't have to be in my situation where you don't have any other choice. This can help you along the whole way. So with that, today we're going to talk about pH and acidic versus alkaline bodies. So I just want to review first, though. I got my glasses here, which means I'm going to maybe read something today. And I have my whiteboard with my wife's grocery list erased off of it. And I just want to review a little bit of what's going on. So we talked about, here's your cell. It's a nice healthy cell. It's got a nice round, and there's a reflection here. It's got a nice round body to it, and we said we can feed the cell. Up here we have sugar, or in my case we're using fat. We go to a process called the Krebs cycle. You remember that from the other day, the Krebs cycle, which in turn goes into a molecule called ATP. So the molecule ATP, that's the food source to give energy to that cell. I wish it wasn't so glary. Sorry about this, but the important part of all of this is once this ATP molecule is spent, you'll remember I said it gives off little proteins and gas, and it's a molecule. It changes forms. So one of those things that comes off of that is an organic protein called lactate. So, and I mentioned this the other day about lactate is a normal function. It's a normal byproduct of this whole process. Lactate itself goes into what's called the Cori cycle. So that's CORI. And if you want to look it up, I mean, it's interesting. It's the conversion of this lactate protein, and it actually gets recycled back into the Krebs cycle. So I know it's kind of messy and hard to write, but that's the normal feeding process, or respiration it's called, of a cell. Now, in my case, since I have cancer, my cell is not round and pretty like that. The actual nucleus of the cell is quite a bit bigger, and the cell actually has some feet on it, and it's kind of, cancer cells under a microscope are very, very unique and easy to find because they don't look like a perfectly sunny side up egg. So it's easy to see what a cancer cell looks like. Now, remember back when I told you the cancer cells take 19 times more sugar to process to maintain life. They consume sugar like crazy. Well, they go through the same Krebs effect, but remember, the byproduct is lactate. So in my case, I get the lactate, and the odd one comes out and goes through this Cori cycle and can go back into the Krebs cycle, but a lot of it just gets spilt out, and it has nowhere to go. So that's what is called it's a lactic acid buildup, but it's also referred to as lactic acidosis. And you remember I said if you had lactic acidosis in your whole body, it's very dangerous, but when it's localized, it's no big deal. And just for an example of what lactic acid and lactic acidosis really is, if you've been out shoveling your driveway or doing some gardening or helping your friends move, you can do that for the day and it's good. But it's actually the next day that you get that burning muscle sensation. Well, that muscle burning sensation is actually lactic acidosis. And the reason for that is because you're extending and you're using muscle cells faster than you can replenish the oxygen. So you get this buildup of lactic acid. Now in a healthy, normal human body, you've got arteries and vessels going by that take all that excess garbage away and take it to your liver and the kidneys, and it gets processed wherever it ends up. Lots of things get reused, they get regenerated, or they get thrown out. So that's what happens in a normal body. But in a cancerous body, because you're never done shoveling or doing the gardening or helping your friends move, so that acid builds up. And if you remember back when we talked about the Warburg effect, we determined that cancer cells can live in an acidic environment. In fact, they thrive in this acidic environment. B, they don't need a lot of oxygen. So what we're doing with this lactic acid buildup, with all this regeneration of new cells, is actually building an even better environment for those cells to prosper in. So what I have to do, now that I can get my diet under control, I can get the starvation under control, I can reduce the lactic acid generation because I've reduced the sugar in my diet and I'm using fat conversion and beta oxidization versus all those lactic byproducts. And so what I know in my own body is I still have a lactic acid buildup. And I know that a couple of ways. The one way I know, I get my blood taken every month, and usually in the beginning of the month, so I'll share that with you when I get those blood results, and I'll kind of go through what they mean. But my blood results, I get my alkalinity tested. So my alkalinity last month was 7.2, which is a little bit low. The average blood alkaline level is 7.3, and it's a very, very tight tolerance. So if mine goes below 7.2, I would know it. And just based on what does 7.2 mean, pure water is 7.0. It's really the only thing that has a pure neutral acidity alkalinity. On the acid side of the scale is things like soda, sugars on the acid side. There's some really sweet fruits. Meat is actually a little bit on the acid side. Of course, on the extreme acid side is battery acid, vinegar, stuff like that. On the alkaline side, on the extreme alkaline side, there's baking soda, which is sodium bicarbonate. There's chalk dust, and then for closer to the middle is the vegetables. Actually, it's the vegetables that I eat: the cucumbers, the celery, the things we discussed the other day. Zucchini, it's slightly alkaline. Some of it's more alkaline than others, but that's kind of the scale that it's on. So blood is 7.3. Normal blood is 7.3. If you were going to test your blood, it would be 7.3. When I get my blood tested at 7.2, it's a little lower. I know it's acidic, but I also know that my body's probably more acidic than the 7.2 for two reasons. And one is because blood is a funny thing. Just because your blood becomes a little more acidic, the actual body makes every effort possible to bring that alkalinity back up to 7.3. So it'll take protons or proteins and different substances from all over to raise that alkalinity a bit. So taking the blood, it tells you a little bit, it doesn't tell you a lot. So what I do instead of that is I use this product instead. This is called Real Doctors. This is the manufacturer. These are actually urine strips. So this gives me a much better guidance of what's going on in my body and how alkaline or acidic it is. And I'll just kind of show you. It's a little difficult, though. That's the strip. That's what it looks like. This came from Amazon. They're $20 for 100. So just go through this. This one just happens to have leukocytes, protein, nitrate, pH, blood, ketones, specific gravity, bilirubin, and glucose. That's what these strips actually measure. The ones that are important to me are the pH that we're talking about now, the ketones, which we talked about yesterday, so I don't have to spend a whole lot of those $5 little test strips. I can measure my urine and see that it's usually off scale high because of my ketosis. And I always am interested in glucose, because in a normal person, that glucose, you never ever should see glucose in your urine. But because what I'm doing, I'm actually looking for glucose to come through, because that means that the blockers that I talk about and the enablers that I talk about, that means that's all working. If I have 10 croutons today, tomorrow morning, I can see that I'll actually have a little bit of discoloration on that glucose test panel, which for me it's good to monitor. And of course, the blood, if you ever saw blood on one of these test strips, then it's time to go see the doctor, because that means you have bigger problems with your kidneys or something else is going on. But for me, I measure my pH, and so this is the bottle. You just line this up with this strip here and go down. So for pH, over the past 8 years, I've known I've had a pH problem since the first time I had cancer, and it's just, with a lot of research, a lot of asking questions, it's all making sense now. So that's what I'm sharing with you. I would struggle to keep my pH on that orange. Mine would, over 8 years, it would always be way below that orange bottom, which is 5.0 on this scale. So I know that I have a pH issue, and I know I can prove easily that every body with cancer has an acidic state. So the things that I'm going to discuss tomorrow, the things that I can do now that we've got all this chemistry out of the way, I can discuss this morning, tomorrow, what it is that I do, how can I lower that acid in my body by A, nutrition, B, there's different things that I can take for vitamins and stuff, and I have a little juice that I make to try and boost up that alkaline level. So that's what will be this discussion tomorrow. My 15 minutes is almost up already, so thank you very much for joining. Please share, and thanks for listening to the end. It will get a little more exciting as we move on. Have a good day.